Hello, friends. You're watching The Night Watchman, where every day you'll hear a brand new horror story that will send chills down your spine. But to keep bringing you these terrifying tales, we need your love and support. So don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Now let's begin the story. I never believed in the old family tales until that Christmas in 2023. My name is Emily Carter, and I grew up in the sleepy town of Willow Creek, Vermont, a place where winters bury everything under feet of snow and the holidays mean string lights on every porch, carols echoing from the Methodist church, and my grandparents' old farmhouse glowing like a beacon on the edge of the woods. I'd moved to Boston for college 5 years earlier, chasing a degree in journalism and a life away from the isolation. But that year, with my job as a freelance writer drying up and a recent breakup leaving me hollow, I decided to head back for the holidays. "It'll be good for you," my mom had said over the phone. "Grandpa's stories by the fire, Aunt Lisa's eggnog, real family time." If only I'd known those stories weren't just folklore. The drive up from Boston was brutal, a 6-hour slog through flurries that turned the interstate into a white-knuckle nightmare. By the time I pulled into the gravel driveway of the Carter homestead, dusk had fallen, and the house looked like something out of a postcard. Victorian peaks dusted in snow, icicles hanging like fangs from the eaves, and a massive fir tree in the front yard twinkling with multicolored lights. My family was already there. Mom and Dad from Albany, my brother Jake with his wife Sarah from Portland, Maine, and of course, Grandpa Elias, who at 82 still chopped his own firewood. Grandma had passed 3 years prior, but her spirit lingered in the knitted stockings over the mantel and the scent of cinnamon in the air. We gathered that first night around the dining table, plates piled with turkey and stuffing, the radio softly playing Silent Night. Grandpa, with his weathered face and pipe smoke aura, leaned back in his chair. "You kids know about the winter wraith, don't you?" he asked, eyes twinkling with that mix of mischief and something darker. Jake rolled his eyes. I'd heard this one before. It was our family's ghost story, passed down from Grandpa's grandpa. Back in 1892, during the great blizzard that hit the Northeast, our great-great-grandfather, Silas Carter, was a lumberman in these very woods. Times were tough. The mill shut down, food scarce. Legend had it, Silas found a stranger half frozen in the snow, a drifter from Canada, begging for shelter. But Silas, paranoid and starving, thought the man was after his hidden stash of provisions. In a fit of rage, he bashed the stranger's head with an axe and buried him under the roots of an old oak tree, right where our farmhouse now stands. "The wraith," Grandpa would say, "is that poor soul's vengeance. Comes every harsh winter, whispering through the pines, seeking warmth it never got." We laughed it off, of course. "Old wives' tales," Mom said, pouring more wine. But as the evening wore on, a chill settled in the house that the roaring fire couldn't touch. I chalked it up to the drafty windows and went to bed in my old room upstairs, the one with the slanted ceiling and the view of the forest. Sleep came fitfully, broken by the wind howling like distant screams. The next morning, Christmas Eve, dawned crisp and bright. We spent the day decorating, stringing garlands, baking cookies, and building snowmen in the yard. Jake and Sarah announced they were expecting a baby, and the house filled with cheers. But around noon, while I was outside fetching more firewood, I noticed footprints in the fresh snow. Not ours. They circled the house, small and barefoot, leading into the woods but not out. "Probably a deer," Dad muttered when I showed him, but his voice lacked conviction. Vermont winters play tricks on the eyes, right? That afternoon, Aunt Lisa arrived from Burlington with her famous pecan pie and stories from her nursing job at the hospital. We exchanged gifts early, socks for me, a new scarf for Mom, and settled in for a movie marathon. "It's a Wonderful Life" flickered on the TV as snow began falling again, heavier this time. Around 8 p.m., the power flickered once, twice, then died. "Storm must have knocked out the lines," Grandpa said, lighting candles. We huddled by the fire, and that's when Grandpa dove deeper into the backstory. "Silas wasn't always cruel," he explained, his voice low. "He had a family, wife and 2 kids, but the blizzard trapped them for weeks. Food ran out, and Silas, well, he did what he thought he had to. The drifter wasn't the first. There were rumors he sacrificed others to save his own. The wraith isn't just angry, it's hungry for the warmth of the living, especially on Christmas, when families gather like we are. A shiver ran down my spine, but I dismissed it as the wine. We played cards by candlelight until midnight, toasting to the holiday. As we headed to bed, I heard it, a faint scratching at the back door, like nails on wood. "Raccoons," Sarah whispered, but her face was pale. I woke at 3 a.m. to a whisper, not the wind but a voice soft and pleading, "Let me in. So cold." My room was freezing, breath visible in the air. I sat up, heart pounding, and saw frost etching patterns on the window, patterns that looked like fingerprints. Shaking it off as a dream, I burrowed under the covers. But sleep evaded me, and by dawn, an unease had settled over the house. Christmas morning brought more oddities. The tree lights were on, even though the power was still out. Gifts under the tree had been rearranged, some unwrapped with ribbons neatly tied back. "Who did this?" Mom asked, frowning. No one confessed. We opened presents anyway. A new laptop for Jake, books for me, but the joy felt forced. Outside, the footprints were back, deeper now, circling tighter. And in the snow near the oak tree, the massive one Grandpa said marked the burial spot, there was a depression like something had clawed its way up. Grandpa grew quiet, his stories ceasing. "Maybe it's nothing," he said, but his hands trembled as he sipped coffee. We tried to salvage the day with brunch, pancakes and bacon, but then Sarah screamed from the kitchen, on the window pane, scratched into the frost. "Warmth. Give me warmth." We all saw it before it melted away. Panic flickered in our eyes, but Dad insisted it was a prank. "Probably kids from town," he said, though Willow Creek was miles from anywhere. As the day wore on, the storm intensified, winds battering the house like fists. We lost cell service, the landline dead, isolated. That's when the real suspense began. Around 2 p.m., while exploring the attic for old board games, I found a dusty journal, Silas Carter's, dated 1892. Yellowed pages detailed his descent. "The hunger gnaws. The stranger came begging, but I could not share. His blood warms the earth now." Further entries spoke of hallucinations, whispers in the night, and a figure in the snow, pale, frostbitten, eyes like black ice. "It wants in," he wrote, "not just the house, but our souls. On the holiest night, it feeds." I showed it to Grandpa, who paled. "I thought it was lost," he whispered. "Emily, that drifter. He wasn't alone. Silas killed his whole family too, to hoard the food. The wraith is all of them, bound together." My blood ran cold. Was this real, or was Grandpa's mind slipping? By evening, the house felt alive with malice. Doors creaked open on their own. Shadows danced in corners where no candle flickered. Jake suggested we leave, but the driveway was buried under 3 feet of snow, our cars immobilized. "We'll wait it out," Dad said, barricading the doors. We gathered in the living room, fire blazing, singing carols to drown out the growing whispers. "Cold, so cold. Let us in." At midnight, the knocking started, slow, deliberate, at every window and door. Not animal, not wind. Human. We froze, staring at each other. Sarah clutched her belly, tears streaming. "What if it's real?" she sobbed. Grandpa stood, axe in hand. The same one from the shed he claimed was Silas's. "We have to face it," he said. I volunteered to check the back porch, flashlight in hand. The snow swirled like a living thing as I opened the door a crack. There in the beam's light stood a figure, tall, emaciated, skin blue and cracked like frozen earth. Its eyes locked on mine, mouth opening in a silent plea. Warmth. I slammed the door, heart exploding, but it was too late. The whispers invaded my mind, pulling at memories. My breakup, my failures, promising relief in the cold embrace. Back inside, chaos erupted. The fire dimmed unnaturally, shadows lengthening. Jake vanished upstairs to check the fuses, but his scream echoed moments later. We rushed up to find him in my room, staring at the window, etched in fresh frost. "One of you must pay, like Silas did." Sarah collapsed, and that's when the entity revealed itself fully. It wasn't one wraith, but many, ghostly forms seeping through the walls, frost spreading like veins across the floor. They were the Drifter, Silas's family, all victims of that brutal winter. "You carry his blood," they hissed in unison. "Give us one, or we take all." Grandpa confessed then, voice breaking. "It happened to me once, in '68. I, I let it take my brother. That's why your Uncle Tom disappeared. I thought it was over." Horror gripped us. The wraiths closed in, cold so intense it burned. In desperation, we fought. Salt from the kitchen, prayers shouted into the void. But they latched onto Sarah, drawn to the new life within her. Jake charged, axe swinging, but a spectral hand pierced his chest, freezing his heart. He dropped, lifeless, eyes wide in terror. We fled to the basement, barricading ourselves as the house groaned under the assault. Hours blurred into agony, whispers promising peace if we surrendered. Mom broke first, opening the door to end it. Her screams faded into the storm. Dad followed, muttering apologies. Left with Grandpa, I confronted him. "Why us?" He wept. "The curse binds the bloodline. Every generation on a white Christmas, it returns unless fed." As the wraiths battered the door, I realized the truth. Silas hadn't just killed. He'd made a pact with the winter itself, trading souls for survival. And now it was my turn. In the final moments, as cold fingers pried the door open, Grandpa shoved me toward the coal chute. "Run, Emily! Break the cycle!" I scrambled out into the snow, the wraith's howls chasing me. I ran through the woods, barefoot and freezing, until I collapsed at the church in town, bells tolling dawn. They found the house empty, bodies gone, swallowed by the snow. Officials called it a tragic accident, carbon monoxide or exposure. But I know the truth. The wraiths wait, patient as winter. And next Christmas, if the snow falls heavy, they'll whisper again. Story 2. It began with the lights. In Evergreen Hollow, Colorado, a sleepy suburb nestled in the shadow of the Rockies where Christmas meant more than tinsel and turkey, the string lights on 1427 Pinecrest Drive had always been legendary. Old man Harlan Whitaker hung them every December 1st, transforming his two-story colonial into a beacon that drew families from Denver for the annual Holiday Lights Tour. Red, green, blue, and white bulbs twinkled in perfect symmetry, synchronized to Silent Night, blasting from hidden speakers. Kids pressed their faces to car windows. Parents snapped photos, and Harlan waved from his porch, a thermos of spiked eggnog in hand. That was back when he was alive. Ellie Harper remembered it vividly. She'd grown up 2 houses down at 1431 Pinecrest, back when her dad still lived with them, before the divorce and his move to Phoenix. Harlan was the neighborhood Santa, gruff but generous, slipping candy canes into mailboxes and shoveling driveways at dawn. "Merry Christmas, little Harper," he'd call, his voice gravelly from years of chain-smoking Camels. Ellie was 12 then, obsessed with the lights. One night in 1998, she snuck over after her parents fought, curling up under his porch swing to watch the display until he found her, wrapped her in a blanket, and drove her home without a word to Mom. Now at 39, Ellie was back in Evergreen Hollow after 15 years away. Her mom, Agnes, had passed in October, pancreatic cancer, swift and merciless, and the house at 1431 was hers now, creaky and cluttered with memories. Ellie worked remote as a graphic designer for a Denver firm, so selling made no sense yet. The divorce from Mark had drained her savings, and Colorado's housing market was a nightmare. Besides, Christmas was coming, and something about the season pulled her back. She arrived November 28th, just in time for Thanksgiving leftovers and the first snow. The first odd thing happened that night. Unpacking boxes in the attic, Ellie found a dusty ornament, a glass snowflake etched with HW92. Harlan's initials. She'd never seen it before, but it felt familiar, like a half-remembered dream. She hung it on the mantel downstairs next to Mom's nativity scene. That evening, as flurries danced outside, she glanced out the window toward Harlan's old place. The house had sat empty since he died in 2005. Heart attack, they said, found slumped in his living room amid tangled extension cords. No family to claim it. The bank foreclosed, but rumors swirled. Squatters? Ghosts? The lights tour skipped it now, locals calling it the Blackout House. But that night, as Ellie sipped hot cocoa by the fire, a flicker caught her eye. Across the street in Harlan's window, a single string of lights blinked on. Red, green, blue, white. Just for a second, she blinked, rubbed her eyes. Power lines were down from the snow? No, the rest of the block glowed steadily. Heart thumping, she grabbed her phone, snapped a photo. The flash reflected nothing but darkness. When she checked the picture later, it was black, except for a faint smudge of color in the window. Blame the jet lag, she thought, locking the doors and heading to bed. Evergreen Hollow was safe. The worst crime was kids TPing houses on Halloween. The next morning, December 1st, Ellie woke to a knock. It was Mrs. Delaney from next door, bundled in a puffy coat, holding a foil pan of fudge. "Welcome back, dear. Saw your car. Harlan's lights started up last night. Creepy, right? Probably those city kids messing around." Ellie forced a laugh, mentioning the photo. Mrs. Delaney's smile faded. "Harlan? Oh, honey, don't stir that pot. He wasn't right at the end. Talking to shadows, they said. And that business with the girl," Ellie pressed. Turns out Harlan had a backstory darker than the holiday cheer suggested. In 1992, he'd fostered a girl named Lily, 8 years old, orphaned after her parents died in a car wreck on I-70. CPS placed her with him because he was good with kids, a widower who'd lost his own daughter to leukemia years prior. Lily lived there 2 Christmases. Quiet kid, pale with big blue eyes. Then December 24th, 1993, she vanished. No trace. Harlan claimed she ran away after eating his cookies by the tree. Search parties combed the woods behind Pinecrest. Nothing. He hung those lights every year after, brighter, as if calling her back. Locals whispered he'd done something, locked her in the basement maybe, but no evidence. Case went cold. Ellie shivered. Why'd no one look closer? Mrs. Delaney shrugged. Small town, holidays. Harlan was beloved, and kids run off sometimes. That afternoon, Ellie shoveled her walk, stealing glances at 1427. The house sagged under icicles, paint peeling like dead skin. For sale sign? No, just boarded windows and a chain-link fence. As dusk fell, she strung her own lights, simple white LEDs, to reclaim the season. Plugged them in, stepped back. They worked fine. Then across the street, Harlan's lights ignited. Full display, thousands of bulbs pulsing to a faint melody carried on the wind. Silent night. Her stomach dropped. No power, no car in the drive. She called the non-emergency line. "Probably trespassers," the dispatcher said. "Deputy'll swing by." No deputy came. By 10 p.m., the show raged, lights strobing like a seizure. Ellie watched from her dark living room, phone recording. Shapes moved behind the glow. Shadows. She zoomed in. A small figure, child-size, pressed against the glass. Lily? Impossible. Heart-pounding, she texted her brother in Phoenix. Harlan's house lit up. Freaky. "Remember Lily?" His reply. "Don't go over there, Elle. Dad always said Harlan was off. Stay inside." Sleep evaded her. Around 2 a.m., a soft thump from the attic. Ellie froze, clutching her phone's flashlight. Rats? The house was old. She crept upstairs, beam cutting through dust motes. The snowflake ornament was gone from the mantel. She'd swear it was there. In the attic, amid Mom's old boxes, footprints in the dust, small ones leading to the window overlooking Harlan's. Fresh snow dusted the sill, undisturbed outside. Her breath fogged the glass as she peered down. Light still blazed. And there on Harlan's porch, something hung from the railing, a single red ornament, swaying, kids pranking. She barricaded the attic door, downed a melatonin, and crashed. December 2nd brought 6 inches of snow and a hangover headache. Ellie worked from the kitchen table, designing logos for a holiday campaign, ironic festive fonts blurring on her screen. By noon, a package arrived via UPS. No sender, addressed to E. Harper, 1431 Pinecrest. Inside, wrapped in tissue, the missing glass snowflake, etched HW 92, and a note in spidery handwriting. "Keep the lights on for Lily." She comes home Christmas Eve, ice in her veins. She didn't recognize the script, but it matched Harlan's old Christmas cards Mom kept. Dropped it like it burned, called the sheriff's office. Deputy Ruiz arrived at 3 p.m. Stocky guy in his 40s, mustache dusted with snow. He examined the note, the footprints, the video. Kids with too much time, he grunted, but his eyes lingered on Harlan's house. Lights off now, house dead. Heard the stories. Lily Carmichael. Files sealed. Minor. But Harlan, after she vanished, he bricked up the basement window. Never went down there again. Coroner found bones when they cleared the house. Dog bones, they said. Ruiz promised to check the property. Ellie watched him kick through the snow to 1427, flashlight probing the fence. He vanished inside for 20 minutes. When he emerged pale, he waved her off. Kids' junk, extension cords, bulbs, nothing. But his cruiser peeled out too fast. Night fell early, solstice gloom. Ellie cooked pasta, poured wine, tried Netflix. Anything to drown the dread. At 8 p.m., power flickered block wide. Hers held. Harlan's erupted again. Brighter, music louder, drawing distant cheers from the lights tour starting up. Cars slowed, oblivious. Ellie peeked. Ruiz's cruiser parked curbside, empty. Then a scream, high-pitched, childlike, from the house. Her blood froze. She dialed 911. Deputy's car. Something's wrong. Dispatch crackled. Units en route. She grabbed her coat, boots crunching snow as she crossed the street. Lights blinded her, pulsing like a heartbeat. Front door ajar, chain snapped. Deputy, Harlan's house. Anyone? Flashlight app on. She stepped inside. Stale air hit like a fist. Mold, pine needles, something metallic. Living room trashed, overturned furniture, shattered bulbs. Extension cords snaked everywhere. Live wires humming. In the corner, a Christmas tree, real fur, fresh cuts oozing sap, decorated with faded ornaments. One dangled, her snowflake. Footsteps overhead. Thump, thump. Ruiz. Deputy. She climbed the stairs, wood groaning. Upstairs hall, doors ajar, rooms gutted. Last door, marked Lily's room in peeling paint. Inside, pink walls faded to gray. Twin bed with threadbare quilt. On the pillow, a Polaroid time-stamped yesterday. Ellie sleeping in her bed at 1431, oblivious. A whisper. Lights. Keep them on. She spun. Nothing. But the closet door creaked open. Inside, scrawled on the wall, She comes home Christmas Eve. H.W. panic clawed her throat. Downstairs, Ruiz's voice. Miss Harper, you in here? Relief flooded her. She bolted down, burst into the living room. He stood by the tree, back to her, staring at the wall. Deputy, he turned, no mustache. Eyes milky white, skin slack like melted wax. In his hand, a string of lights plugged into nothing. Ellie, he rasped, voice Harlan's gravel. Lily's waiting. She ran, burst into the snow, lungs burning, toward her house. Lights tore, cars honked, families waving. Slamming her door, she deadbolted everything, dragged the couch against it. Phone, no signal. Power out now, her LEDs the only glow. Outside, Harlan's display thundered, music warping. Silent night. Whom? Dawn, December 3rd. Power restored, no cruiser. Ruiz called at 9 a.m. Checked the property last night. All clear. You okay? His voice normal, mustache confirmed on a quick video call. Must have dreamed it, she muttered. Note and Polaroid vanished from her pockets. Gasped at the mirror. Faint scratches on her neck, like tiny fingernails. Days blurred. Ellie researched obsessively. Lily's file, unsealed online. Disappeared 1993, age 8. Harlan fostered her post his daughter's death. Guilt-driven. Basement bones. Not dogs. Rabbit skeletons, arranged in a circle under the stairs. No charges. Locals posted on Reddit. Harlan's lights move on their own. Saw a girl once. December 15th. Another package. Doll. Porcelain. Blue-eyed. Dressed in 90s holiday sweater. Note. Sing for her. Christmas Eve. She burned it in the fireplace, ashes swirling up the chimney like screams. Snow deepened, isolating Evergreen Hollow. Ellie boarded windows, stocked canned goods. December 23rd, today wind howled biblical. Lights tour peak tonight. Her own display? Off. But at dusk they flickered on unplugged. Across the street, full blaze. Cars lined up, oohing, knock. Mrs. Delaney, frantic. Ellie's lights, Harlan's too. And Ruiz, he's missing. They found his cruiser in the woods, lights strung through the trees like a noose. Ellie barred the door. 11 p.m. Music swelled. All is calm, all is bright. Thumps at the back door. Small hands. She armed herself with a fire poker, retreated to the attic. Footprints again leading to the window. Outside in Harlan's yard, shapes danced. Children? No. Silhouettes stretched wrong, limbs too long. Midnight. A child's voice, clear as glass. Ellie, I kept the lights on for you, like Daddy did. Come home. Flashlight down. The snowflake glowed on the floor, pulsing. Cracks spread across it. Something shifted in the corner. Pale face, blue eyes, smile too wide. Lily, or what Harlan made. Ellie screamed as icy fingers gripped her ankle. The lights exploded in white-hot fury, plunging Evergreen Hollow into perfect, endless dark. Story 3. I never thought Christmas could turn into a nightmare. But in the winter of 2024, in the quiet suburbs of Madison, Wisconsin, it did. My name is Emily Carter, and I'm a 28-year-old graphic designer who had just moved back to my hometown after a messy breakup in Chicago. The city lights and endless traffic had worn me down. So when my Aunt Margaret passed away and left me her old Victorian house on Elm Street, it felt like a fresh start. Little did I know that house held secrets buried deeper than the snowdrifts outside. Aunt Margaret was a recluse, the kind of woman who collected antique ornaments and never threw away a single Christmas card. She died alone in her sleep last October at 82, with no kids of her own. The will specified that I, her only niece, inherit everything. The house, the furniture, even her massive collection of holiday decorations stored in the attic. My parents, who lived in Milwaukee, encouraged me to take it. It's a beautiful place, Emily, my mom said over the phone. Just needs a little love. I arrived in early December, the moving truck crunching over fresh snow. The house was stunning from the outside. Gingerbread trim, a wraparound porch, and a turret that made it look like something out of a fairy tale. But inside, it smelled of mothballs and forgotten memories. The first few weeks were uneventful. I set up my home office in the sunroom, overlooking a backyard blanketed in white. Work kept me busy, designing logos for startups, and I even started decorating for Christmas to shake off the loneliness. I pulled boxes from the attic, strings of twinkling lights, porcelain angels, and a peculiar wooden advent calendar shaped like a miniature house with 25 tiny doors. Each door had a faded engraving, like runes or old symbols. I thought it was quirky, a family heirloom maybe. Aunt Margaret's journals, stacked in the basement, mentioned it briefly. The calendar came from the old settler days, a gift from the Harrisons in 1892. Best not to open all the doors at once. I chuckled at that, superstitious old lady stuff. As Christmas approached, the weather turned brutal. Blizzards rolled in from Lake Michigan, burying the town under feet of snow. Power flickered, but the house had a generator, so I hunkered down with hot cocoa and Netflix. That's when the oddities began. It started small, ornaments falling off the tree in the living room without a breeze. I'd wake up to find them shattered on the floor, glass shards forming patterns that looked almost like words. Coincidence, I told myself. Then the Advent calendar. I opened the first door on December 1st, finding a tiny carved figure inside, a wooden child with a painted smile. Cute, but by the 10th, the figures inside were off. One was a man with hollow eyes, another a woman clutching a bundle that resembled a baby. Each night, I'd hear scratching behind the walls like mice, but the exterminator found nothing. I dug deeper into Aunt Margaret's journals for answers. She had inherited the house from her grandmother, Eliza Harrison, back in the 1950s. The Harrisons were one of Madison's founding families, settling here in the 1840s during the westward expansion. Eliza's entries were cryptic. The curse of 92 lingers. Father warned us about the ritual. The doors must stay closed on the 25th. What ritual? I searched online. Nothing specific about the Harrisons except a brief mention in local history books about a tragic fire in 1892. On Christmas Eve that year, the Harrison family home, my house, I realized, burned partially, killing 3 children. The parents, Samuel and Clara Harrison, survived but were never the same. Rumors swirled of foul play, but it was ruled an accident from a faulty chimney. Suspicion gnawed at me. Why the Advent calendar? I called my mom, but she dismissed it. Margaret was always dramatic. Just enjoy the holidays, sweetie. But I couldn't shake it. On December 15th, I opened the door to find a figure that looked eerily like me. Long hair, blue dress. My heart raced. That night, the scratching turned to whispers, faint like wind through cracks, but words, open us, free us. I barricaded myself in the bedroom, telling myself it was the isolation playing tricks. The backstory unfolded as I explored the basement. Behind a loose panel, I found a hidden compartment with old letters and a faded photograph from 1892. The Harrisons, Samuel, stern-faced, Clara, hollow-eyed, and their 5 children, all under 10. One letter from Samuel to his brother detailed the horror. The natives warned us about the land, an ancient burial ground, they said. But we built anyway. On Christmas Eve, we performed the ritual to appease the spirits, opening the doors of the calendar, carved from sacred wood. It backfired. The children, they changed. Eyes black as coal. We had to lock them in the attic to contain it. The fire was no accident, it was mercy. My blood ran cold. The calendar was a conduit, a cursed artifact from Native American lands, perhaps mishandled by settlers. I recalled vague stories of Wisconsin's indigenous history, the Ho-Chunk tribes displaced in the 1800s. Had the Harrisons disturbed something sacred? I tried to burn the calendar that night, but the wood wouldn't catch fire. Instead, the flames leaped to the curtains, forcing me to douse it with water. Exhausted, I collapsed into bed, the whispers growing louder. Christmas Eve arrived with a vengeance. The storm howled outside, winds battering the windows like angry fists. I invited a friend, Jake Thompson, over for company. He was a local mechanic I'd met at the coffee shop downtown. "This place gives me the creeps," he said, eyeing the tree. We drank eggnog, watched old movies, but around midnight, the power cut out completely. The generator hummed to life, but the lights dimmed erratically. Then the Advent calendar on the mantel began to glow faintly, its unopened doors vibrating. "Don't touch it," I warned Jake. But curiosity got the better of him. He opened the 24th door, revealing a tiny flame carved inside. Suddenly, the house shook. Footsteps echoed from the attic, small, pattering feet. We grabbed flashlights and crept upstairs. The attic door, always locked, swung open. Inside, amid dusty boxes, stood 5 small figures. Not dolls, children. Pale skin, black eyes, dressed in Victorian clothes. They turned to us, smiling with teeth too sharp. "Play with us," one whispered, voice like cracking ice. Jake screamed, backing away. I recognized them from the photo. The Harrison children, unchanged after 132 years. The curse, trapped in the calendar, released only if all doors opened by Christmas. Aunt Margaret must have known, keeping it sealed. But I'd started it, and Jake finished. We ran downstairs, but the doors locked themselves. Windows frosted over with impossible ice patterns, symbols matching the calendar. The children descended, giggling. Mother said we'd have guests this year. Backstory hit me like a blizzard. The ritual in 1892 summoned spirits into the kids, turning them into vessels for ancient entities angered by the land theft. The fire was Samuel's attempt to end it, but it only bound them to the house, waiting for the calendar to be reopened. Suspense built as they cornered us in the living room. Jake swung a poker from the fireplace, but it passed through one like smoke. They solidified only to touch, to scratch, to pull. I felt tiny hands on my ankle, cold as death. "Join the family," they chanted. In desperation, I grabbed the calendar and smashed it against the hearth. Wood splintered and a burst of ethereal light filled the room. The children wailed, dissolving into wisps that swirled toward the broken pieces. But it wasn't over. As the light faded, I saw Aunt Margaret's face in the mirror, smiling, her eyes black. "You opened the last door," she whispered from my reflection. Jake bolted for the door, now unlocked, yelling for me to follow. I hesitated, feeling a pull inside me. The spirits weren't gone. They'd found a new host. We escaped into the snow, sirens wailing in the distance. Neighbors must have seen the glow. Jake drove us to the hospital, babbling about hallucinations from carbon monoxide. But I knew the truth. The house burned that night. Unexplained arson, they said. I moved back to Chicago, but every Christmas I hear the scratching. And in mirrors, sometimes my eyes flicker black. Was it real? Or isolation-induced madness? I'll never know. But if you inherit an old Advent calendar, leave it closed. Story 4. It started with the lights. In Evergreen, Colorado, where the pines claw at the sky like frozen fingers, December painted the streets in festive glows. Strings of multicolored bulbs draped every ranch-style house on Elmwood Drive, twinkling against the relentless snow. But at number 47, the Harrisons' home stood dark, except for one window on the second floor, where a single red bulb flickered like a dying heartbeat. Jake Harrison, 42, a high school history teacher with calloused hands from chopping firewood, first noticed it on December 15. He'd just shoveled the driveway after a brutal blizzard dumped 2 feet overnight. His wife, Sarah, 39, a nurse at Lutheran Medical Center in nearby Lakewood, was inside baking gingerbread men with their daughter Lily, 12. Lily had begged for the lights that year, her wide blue eyes pleading over turkey dinner. "Dad, please? It'll be magical." Jake grunted agreement, hauling the last scoop of snow. That's when he saw it, the red glow pulsing from Lily's bedroom window. He hadn't plugged in any lights up there. Shaking powder from his parka, he trudged inside, boots thudding on the welcome mat embroidered with "Ho Ho Home." "Sarah, you put up a light in Lily's room?" She looked up from the oven, flour dusting her apron. "No, why?" He climbed the stairs, the wood creaking under his weight. Lily's door was ajar, the room empty, posters of Taylor Swift and the Denver Broncos curling at the edges from humidity. The window overlooked the backyard, where their old swing set rusted under a blanket of white. No bulb, no cord. Just the faint red reflection in the glass, like blood seeping from the frame. "Wind must be playing tricks," he muttered, rubbing his stubbled jaw. Evergreen winters did that, howled through the cracks, turned shadows into specters. He chalked it up to fatigue and headed downstairs for eggnog. That night, Lily woke screaming. Jake bolted upright, heart hammering. Sarah was already in the hall, robe clutched tight. "Mom, there's a man outside my window!" They rushed in. Lily huddled under her quilt, strawberry blonde hair matted with sweat. The window was shut tight, frost etching fractal patterns on the pane. No footprints in the snow below, just the swing set swaying gently, though the wind had died hours ago. "Bad dream, sweetie," Sarah soothed, tucking her in. "Santa's elves are too busy for peeking." But Lily whispered, eyes darting. "He had red eyes, Mom." And he smiled, with too many teeth. Jake checked the locks twice, then lay awake till dawn, staring at the ceiling fan's lazy spin. The backstory of 47 Elmwood Drive wasn't spoken of in polite company. Evergreen was a tight-knit town, founded in the 1800s by gold miners who fled the California rush for quieter veins in the Rockies. But whispers lingered about the house's first owners, Elias and Miriam Crow. Elias had been a lumberjack, broad as a bear, who built the place in 1923 with timber he felled himself. Miriam, his wife, lost 3 babies in a row to diphtheria. Desperate, she turned to old ways, a midwife's lore from her Appalachian roots. On Christmas Eve, 1925, neighbors heard chanting from the attic. The next morning, Miriam was found hanging from the rafters, a crude doll clutched in her rigid fingers. Elias vanished that night, leaving behind smeared footprints in the snow leading to the woods. They never found him. The house sat empty for decades, passed through indifferent owners who ignored the cold spots and the faint scratches on the walls. The Harrisons bought it cheap in 2020, drawn by the spacious lot in the view of Mount Evans. Locals smiled knowingly, but said nothing. History teachers like Jake loved old houses. They reeked of stories. By December 20th, the red light returned nightly. Jake installed a Ring camera on the eve, its feed streaming to his phone. He watched it obsessively during lunch breaks at Evergreen High, kids chattering about Fortnite while he zoomed in on empty snowdrifts. Then on the 22nd, the feed glitched. At 2:17 a.m., a shadow stretched across the frame, tall, hunched, with elongated limbs that didn't bend right. It lingered by the swing set, head tilting as if listening. Jake replayed it a dozen times, breath shallow, no face, just silhouette. He showed Sarah. She paled but blamed deer or a raccoon distorted by the lens. Lily stopped sleeping. She drew pictures at the kitchen table, stick figures with glowing red eyes under Christmas trees, mouths stretched impossibly wide. "He's coming for Christmas, Dad," she said one afternoon, crayon snapping in her grip. "He wants to play." Jake laughed it off, but his palms sweated. He dove into town records at the library, a squat brick building strung with garland. Elias Crow, no death certificate. Miriam's autopsy noted self-inflicted wounds resembling animal bites on her torso. The doll? Never recovered. Old-timers like Mrs. Hargrove at the checkout counter leaned in, her voice a rasp. "Boy, you bought the devil's roost. They say Elias didn't leave. He waits for little ones on Christmas, trades their warmth for his cold." "Superstition," Jake scoffed. But he bought a revolver from the pawn shop in Idaho Springs. Christmas Eve dawned crisp, the town alive with carols from the Lutheran church steeple. Sarah hosted a small gathering, neighbors with pies, eggnog flowing. Lily wore her velvet dress, forcing smiles as she opened gifts early. A new iPad, skates for the frozen pond. But her eyes flicked to the window, where snow swirled like confetti. By 10 p.m., guests gone, the family gathered by the tree in the living room. Multicolored lights bathed the room in warmth, ornaments clinking softly. Jake sipped spiked cider. Sarah hummed Silent Night. Lily clutched a stuffed reindeer, whispering secrets to it. Then the power flickered. Bulbs dimmed, surged, dimmed again. Outside, wind howled, rattling the panes. "Generator?" Sarah asked. Jake checked the breaker in the garage. Fine. Back inside, the red light bloomed in Lily's window upstairs. Stronger now, pulsing like a heartbeat syncing with his own. "Dad, he's here," Lily breathed. They herded her to the couch, barricaded the door with the coffee table. Jake armed the revolver, chamber clicking. The Ring app buzzed, motion detected. He pulled it up. The shadow was back, closer, crouched by the swing set. As he watched, it unfolded, rising 9 feet tall, limbs cracking like breaking branches. Red eyes ignited in the feed, pinpricks of hellfire. It turned toward the house, mouth splitting open in a grin that bisected its skull. Sarah gasped. "What is that?" Footsteps thudded overhead, heavy, deliberate, crossing the attic floorboards. Lily screamed. The tree lights exploded in sparks, plunging the room into black. Only the red glow from upstairs pierced the dark, casting crimson shadows that danced like demons. "Stay here," Jake barked, bounding up the stairs, gun raised. The air thickened, smelling of pine sap and rot. Lily's door hung open, the red light flooding the hall like arterial spray. He edged in. The room was trashed, drawers yanked, mattress shredded. At the window, the bulb wasn't a bulb. It was an eye. A massive, veined orb pressed against the glass from outside, pupil dilating as it focused on him. Claws scraped the sill, wood splintering. Jake fired. The shot boomed, glass shattering. The eye burst in a spray of viscous black fluid, splattering his face. It burned like acid. The shape outside shrieked, a sound like metal on bone, and tumbled back into the snow. Silence, then laughter. Childish giggling from the closet. "Lily?" He yanked the door open, empty. Downstairs, Sarah's voice cracked. "Jake, Lily's gone!" He raced down. The back door yawned open, snow drifting in. Footprints, small ones, Lily's boots, led into the yard, merging with larger clawed tracks toward the woods. They searched till midnight, flashlights cutting the blizzard, calling her name, voices raw. Sheriff deputies arrived at dawn Christmas morning, boots crunching gingerbread crumbs underfoot. No sign. Drones buzzed overhead, but the woods swallowed everything. Jake sat on the porch, revolver limp in his lap, as plows cleared Elmwood Drive. Neighbors whispered, avoiding his gaze. Mrs. Hargrove shuffled by with a casserole, muttering, "Told you, Elias takes him on Christmas, warms his bones with their fire." 2 days later, on December 27th, the red light returned. Jake saw it from his truck, idling in the driveway. Sarah had checked into a motel in Denver, sedated. He stormed inside, gun drawn. Upstairs, Lily's room was pristine, toys neatly aligned, and on the bed sat a doll, crudely sewn from burlap, button eyes replaced with red beads that glowed faintly. In its stitched mouth, a tiny tooth, milk white. Lily's. He burned it in the fireplace that night, flames roaring unnaturally high. The house shook, windows cracking, but the laughter echoed from the walls, endless. Weeks passed. Search called off. Jake sold the house, moved to an apartment in Boulder. But the dreams came. Elias Crow's face, half rotted, grinning amid Christmas lights. "Join the family," he'd rasp. One night, alone with a bottle of Jack, Jake woke to red light seeping under his door. He grabbed a knife, flung it open. Lily stood there, smiling with too many teeth. Snowflakes melted on her pajamas. "Merry Christmas, Dad. He's waiting." In Evergreen, they say 47 Elmwood Drive still flickers red each December. Buyers come and go, but the woods behind it grow thicker, hiding footprints that never fade. Story 5. I never thought Christmas could turn into a nightmare, but that winter in 2025, in the snow-blanketed hills of rural Vermont, it did. My name is Emily Harper, and I'd been living in bustling Seattle for the past decade, chasing a career in tech that kept me far from my family's old Victorian home in Willow Creek. The town was one of those forgotten New England spots, population under 2,000, with maple syrup farms and a single diner that served pie like it was 1950. I'd avoided going back ever since my little brother Tommy disappeared on Christmas Eve 15 years ago. He was only 8, and the police chalked it up to a tragic accident. He'd wandered into the woods during a blizzard and frozen to death. They never found his body, just his red mitten caught on a branch near the edge of our property. Mom and Dad insisted on keeping the traditions alive, decorating the house like nothing happened, but I couldn't stomach it. Until this year. Dad's call came in early December. His voice was frail over the phone, laced with that Vermont drawl I'd almost forgotten. "Emily, your mother's not doing well. The doctors say it's her heart, but she wants the family together one last time. Please come home for Christmas." Guilt twisted in my gut. I was 35 now, single, no kids. My life was a string of late-night coding sessions and takeout. What excuse did I have? So I booked a flight to Burlington, rented a car, and drove the winding roads through the Green Mountains, arriving on December 23rd as fat snowflakes blanketed everything in white. The house loomed at the end of a gravel driveway, its gingerbread trim sagging under icicles. Smoke curled from the chimney, and multicolored lights twinkled in the windows like a postcard. Dad greeted me at the door, his once broad shoulders hunched, eyes watery. "Emily, girl, you look just like your mother did at your age." He hugged me tight, smelling of pipe tobacco and pine. Mom was in the living room, propped on the couch with a quilt, her face pale but smiling. "My Emmy," she whispered, pulling me close. We spent the evening catching up, me talking about my job at a startup, them sharing town gossip. Uncle Frank was coming tomorrow with his wife, Aunt Clara, and their kids. It felt almost normal until I went upstairs to my old room. The air was colder up there, drafts whistling through the cracks. My room hadn't changed, posters of 90s bands on the walls, my twin bed with the faded floral comforter. Tommy's room was across the hall, door always shut. I'd peeked in once as a teen after he vanished, his toys frozen in time, like a shrine. That night, as I unpacked, I heard it, a soft scratching, like nails on wood coming from his door. I froze, heart pounding. Just the wind, I muttered, but it persisted, rhythmic, insistent. I cracked my door open, peering into the dim hallway lit by a single bulb. The scratching stopped. Shaking it off as jet lag, I climbed into bed, the house creaking as it settled. Christmas Eve dawned gray and stormy. Snow piled high outside, the kind that muffles the world. Dad and I trudged to the barn to fetch the artificial tree. Real ones were too messy, Mom always said. As we dragged it inside, he paused, wiping sweat from his brow despite the cold. You know, Emily, Tommy loved this part. He'd string the lights himself. His eyes misted over. I nodded, uncomfortable. Dad, do you ever hear things? At night, he looked at me sharply. What kind of things? Nothing. Forget it. But his gaze lingered, and I felt a chill that wasn't from the weather. Uncle Frank arrived around noon, his SUV crunching over the snow. He was Dad's brother, burly and loud, with a laugh that boomed through the house. Aunt Clara was quieter, her eyes darting nervously. Their twins, Lily and Ben, were 12, energetic kids who immediately begged to build a snowman. We all bundled up and headed out, the kids' shrieks echoing across the yard. As we rolled snowballs, Lily pointed to the woods bordering our property. What's that, she asked. I followed her gaze. A small, weathered cross poked from the snow, half buried. That's nothing, I said quickly. But I knew. It was where they'd found Tommy's mitten. The kids didn't press, but Aunt Clara shot me a worried look. Inside, we decorated the tree. Mom directed from the couch, her voice weak but insistent. Higher on that ornament, Ben. No, the angel goes last. As evening fell, the power flickered, common in storms here. We lit candles, the flames dancing shadows on the walls. Dinner was ham and potatoes, the table set with our best china. Conversation flowed, but I noticed oddities. Uncle Frank kept glancing at the clock. Aunt Clara fidgeted with her napkin, and Dad avoided talking about Tommy altogether. After dessert, the kids opened one gift each, a tradition. Lily got a doll, Ben a model car. Then as midnight approached, Mom suggested we tell stories by the fire. Uncle Frank started with a tall tale about fishing in Lake Champlain. Aunt Clara shared a recipe mishap. When it was my turn, I hesitated. Tell us about Tommy, Lily piped up innocently. The room went silent. Mom's face drained of color. Lily, honey, we don't... Aunt Clara began, but Dad interrupted. It's okay. Emily, maybe it's time. Time for what, I wondered. He cleared his throat. Tommy didn't just wander off. There was more to it. My pulse quickened. What do you mean? He sighed. Your brother was always curious about the old well in the woods. We warned him, but that night he sneaked out. We heard him scream, but by the time we got there, he was gone. Pulled in, we think, but no body. I stared. The well? Why didn't you tell the police? Mom whispered. Because it's not just a well, Emily. It's been there since the 1800s, when the town was founded. Legends say it's a gateway to something below. Uncle Frank nodded. Our family guards it, has for generations. I laughed nervously. This is a joke, right? Some Christmas prank? But their faces were grave. No prank, Dad said. Tommy found out the hard way, and now it's stirring again. That night, as the clock struck 12, the scratching returned, louder from downstairs. I crept out of bed, phone flashlight in hand. The house was dark, candles guttered out. Descending the stairs, I heard whispers, faint, childlike. Emmy, help! My blood ran cold. Tommy's voice? Impossible. I followed it to the basement door, which was ajar. We'd never gone down there as kids. Dad said it was for storage. Heart hammering, I pushed it open, the stairs creaking under my weight. The air was musty, damp, lit by a bare bulb. Boxes cluttered the space, but in the corner, a trap door, padlocked. The whispering grew. Emmy, cold. I knelt, fingers trembling as I touched the lock. It was rusted, old. Behind me, a floorboard groaned. I spun, nothing. Then a hand on my shoulder. I screamed, whirling to face Mom. her eyes wide in the dim light. "What are you doing down here?" she hissed. "I heard, Tommy." Her face softened, but something was off, her smile too wide. "Oh, honey, it's just the wind. Come back up." But as she turned, I saw it, a scar on her neck, fresh like claw marks. Christmas morning, I woke to silence. No excited kids, no smell of coffee. The house felt empty. I dressed quickly, heading downstairs. The tree lights were on, gifts unwrapped, but no one around. "Mom, Dad," I called. Nothing. Panic rising, I checked rooms, then the yard. Footprints in the snow led to the woods. Following them, hard in my throat, I reached the cross. The snow around it was disturbed, like something had been dug up. And there, half buried, was Tommy's mitten, fresh blood staining the red wool. I ran back, dialing 911, but no signal. Storm must have knocked it out. Inside, I found a note on the table. "Emily, forgive us. The guardian must be fed every 15 years or it rises. Tommy was the last. Now it's your turn to understand." "Understand what?" Terror gripped me. I grabbed my keys, but the car wouldn't start. "Battery dead? Sabotaged." The whispers returned, louder, from the basement. I barricaded myself in the living room, but the scratching came from everywhere. Walls, floor, ceiling. Shadows twisted in the candlelight, forming shapes, small hands reaching. "Emmy, join us." Hours passed, or minutes, I lost track. Then pounding on the door. "Emily, it's Uncle Frank." Relief flooded me. I unbolted it, but as he stepped in, his eyes gleamed unnaturally. "We couldn't let you leave without the family secret." Aunt Clara and the kids flanked him, their smiles identical to Mom's, too wide, teeth sharp. They explained in hushed tones. The well wasn't a well. It was a pit dug by settlers who summoned something from below. An entity that promised prosperity to Willow Creek in exchange for a child every generation. Our family were the keepers. Tommy hadn't wandered, he'd been chosen. But he fought, and the thing partially emerged, scarring them all. Now with Mom dying, they needed a new guardian. Me. "It's in your blood," Dad said, appearing from the shadows. "Or it takes us all." I bolted upstairs, locking myself in Tommy's room. Dust-covered toys stared back. His train set, action figures. Under the bed, I found his diary, pages filled with drawings of a monster with tentacles and eyes whispering promises. The last entry? "It wants Emmy next. I have to stop it." Tears streamed as banging shook the door. "Open up, Emily. It's Christmas. Time for gifts." The door splintered. They poured in, eyes glowing faintly. I backed to the window, snow swirling outside. Uncle Frank lunged, but I smashed the glass, leaping into the drift below. Pain shot through my ankle, but I ran, limping through the woods, the entity's whispers chasing. "Emmy, home!" Branches clawed my face, cold bit deep. Behind, their footsteps crunched, calls echoing. I reached the road, flagging down a passing truck, a logger heading to town. "Please, help! My family, they're crazy!" He stared, but drove me to the sheriff's office in Willow Creek. Deputy Harris listened, brow furrowed. "The Harpers, fine folk, but let's check." We drove back, sirens off. The house was lit, carols playing. Mom answered the door, surprised. "Emily, what's wrong?" They all acted normal, no scars, no glowing eyes. The note, gone. Tommy's diary, a blank notebook. The deputy patted my shoulder. "City stress, maybe. Get some rest." But as he left, Mom whispered, "You can't run from family, Emmy. It always finds you." That night, back in my room, the scratching returned, from under my bed. I fled to Seattle the next day, vowing never to return. But now, months later, as snow falls outside my apartment window, I hear it again. Whispers in the vents, scratches on the walls. My reflection shows a scar on my neck, faint but growing. Christmas lights in the city twinkle mockingly. It's coming for me. And this time, there's no escape. Story 6. I never liked Christmas after what happened in Hollow Creek, Pennsylvania. But before that winter, it used to mean warmth, lights, and the sound of my father humming off-key carols while fixing things around the house. This story is about the Christmas that took everything from me. I moved back to Hollow Creek in December after 13 years away. My mother had died suddenly. Heart failure, the doctor said, and the house on Maple Ridge Road was left to me. My father had disappeared years earlier, just after Christmas, and no body was ever found. Most people in town assumed he'd run off. I knew better. The town looked the same when I arrived. Same snow-drowned streets, same flickering streetlights, same smell of pine and cold iron in the air. Christmas decorations hung everywhere, but something about them felt forced, like smiles held too long. The house greeted me with silence. Mom had kept everything exactly the same. Dad's boots still by the door, his red flannel jacket still hanging on the coat rack. The old grandfather clock in the hallway still ticking, even though it hadn't been serviced in years. It stopped at 2:17 a.m. I didn't notice that until later. The first night I slept on the couch. Snow tapped gently against the windows. Around midnight, I heard something outside. Bells. Not jingle bells. Single bells. Slow. Heavy. I sat up, heart pounding, and stared at the front door. The sound stopped. When I finally slept, I dreamed of my father standing at the end of the driveway, dressed as Santa Claus, his face hidden behind a cracked, dirty beard. He kept waving me closer, but his boots were soaked in something dark that bled into the snow. I woke up at 2:17 a.m. The grandfather clock had stopped ticking. The next morning I went into town. Hollow Creek was small, one diner, one grocery store, one church, one sheriff's office. Everyone knew everyone. At Martha's Diner, people stared too long when they recognized me. "You're Daniel Harper's boy," Martha said quietly, pouring my coffee. "Back for Christmas." "Yeah," I said. "Do you remember what happened to him?" Her hand froze. "No one talks about that anymore," she said, "especially not in December." An old man in the corner whispered, "He hears you when you do." That night, the bells came back, closer, from the backyard. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped onto the porch. Snow covered everything except a single set of footprints leading from the tree line to my back door. They were barefoot. I followed them until they stopped, right under the old oak tree. That's where my father used to hang the Christmas lights. That's where he vanished. Something was carved into the bark now. He comes back every Christmas. I started digging through my mother's old things the next day. In the attic, I found a box labeled "Do Not Open December." Inside were cassette tapes. Each one was labeled with a year. Every year after my father disappeared. I played the first one. My mother's voice filled the room, shaking. "Daniel came back tonight. He wore the suit again. I told him we couldn't do this anymore. He said Christmas needs a witness." The tape ended with bells and screaming. That night, someone knocked on my door at exactly 2:17 a.m. 3 slow knocks. I didn't answer. The door handle began to turn anyway. A deep, cheerful voice spoke through the wood. "Ho! Ho! Ho!" I ran upstairs and locked myself in my childhood bedroom. From the hallway, I heard boots dragging across the floor. Wet boots. The smell of iron filled the air. I barricaded the door with my dresser. My phone had no signal. Outside my window, I saw him. Santa Claus. Too tall. Too thin. His suit was torn and stained dark. His beard hung in clumps, revealing a familiar jawline underneath. My father's eyes stared up at me. They were black. "You were supposed to be here," he said calmly. "Your mother took your place." I screamed. He smiled. "I don't remember leaving the house, but I woke up in the snow near the oak tree." The bells were deafening now, ringing from all directions. Townspeople stood around me in a circle, holding candles. Martha, the sheriff, everyone. "It has to be a Harper," the sheriff said quietly. "That's the rule." They dragged me toward the tree. I fought until my hands bled. That's when I saw the other bodies beneath the snow. Bones wrapped in red cloth. Past Christmases, past witnesses. My father stepped forward, placing the Santa hat gently on my head. "Christmas needs a watcher," he said. "Someone who remembers." I realized then what Hollow Creek really was. A town built on sacrifice. A tradition older than the church, older than the road. I don't know how long it's been. Time doesn't work the same anymore. Every year the snow falls. Every year the bells ring. Every year, someone hears knocking at 2:17 a.m. If you ever pass through Hollow Creek in December and see a tall Santa standing by an oak tree, don't stop. Don't listen. And whatever you do, don't open the door. Story 7. I never liked Christmas after what happened in Hollow Creek, Colorado, but for years I convinced myself it was just trauma, not memory. Now, after everything I've uncovered, I know that was a lie. I was 34 the winter it finally came back. Christmas Eve has a way of making silence louder. The town looked postcard perfect. White snow on wooden rooftops, strings of warm yellow lights, church bells echoing across the valley. People waved at each other like nothing bad had ever happened here. But Hollow Creek was built on something rotten. I grew up on Chimney Road, a narrow stretch of forested land just outside town. Only 6 houses sat along that road, each spaced far enough apart that screams wouldn't travel. My parents bought the house cheap in 1996, after the previous owner died suddenly. No family, no funeral, no questions asked. At least that's what I was told. My father, Thomas Reed, worked as a snowplow driver. Quiet man, kept to himself. My mother, Ellen, loved Christmas more than anything. She believed the holiday could fix broken things. Broken people, broken marriages, broken towns. Every year, no matter how tight money was, she decorated the house like it was part of a movie set. Plastic reindeer in the yard, a fake Santa climbing the chimney, stockings sewn by hand. She always said, if we don't invite warmth in, something else will come instead. I didn't understand that line until much later. I was 9 years old when Chimney Road lost a child. Her name was Lucy Calder. She lived 3 houses down from us. Blonde hair, missing front tooth, laughed too loud. She vanished on December 24th, 2003. They said she wandered into the woods. They were wrong. I remember that night clearly, though for years I told myself the memory was a dream. Snow fell hard, thick enough to swallow sound. My parents were arguing quietly in the kitchen. Something about the road again, about lights that shouldn't be on. Then the knock came. 3 slow knocks. I looked out the window before my father could stop me. There was a man standing at the edge of our driveway. He wore a Santa suit, but it was wrong. Too dark, too heavy. The beard looked matted, like it had been soaked and frozen. His boots were black and tall, not the cheerful kind you see in malls. He didn't wave. He just stood there. My father pulled me away from the window so hard my arm hurt. "We don't answer," he said. The knocking didn't come again. The next morning, Lucy was gone. No footprints led away from her house, no signs of struggle, no body, just an open window and a stocking still hanging by the fireplace. The police searched for weeks. Nothing. By February, everyone stopped saying her name, except my mother. My mother started drinking after Lucy disappeared. Not heavily, but steadily. She'd stare out the window toward the woods, especially at night. One evening, I heard her whisper to my father. It took another one. My father didn't argue. That scared me more than anything. A year later, on Christmas Eve, our power went out at exactly 11:47 p.m. My father sat up straight, like he'd been waiting for it. He locked every door, blocked the fireplace with a steel grate. Then he took out a shotgun I'd never seen before. That was the year my mother died. Officially, it was a heart attack. Unofficially, she screamed for 3 minutes before falling silent. I heard boots on the roof. We left Chimney Road the next morning. My father never explained anything. He moved us to Aurora, then drank himself into an early grave 10 years later. On his deathbed, he grabbed my wrist and said just 4 words. It comes when invited. I buried him without answers. I built a life, a quiet one. No Christmas decorations, no fireplaces, no traditions, until last December. It arrived without a return address. Inside was a single photograph. My childhood home on Chimney Road. Decorated, lights glowing, smoke rising from the chimney. On the back, written in the shaky handwriting, "You left the door open." I drove back to Hollow Creek on December 23rd. The town hadn't changed. Same smiles, same bells, same silence underneath it all. The house on Chimney Road was supposed to be abandoned. It wasn't. Lights were on. And in the snow leading up to the front door were boot prints. Large, uneven, not human. Inside the house, Everything was set exactly like it had been the night my mother died. Stockings, tree, even the fake Santa climbing the chimney. Then I heard it, breathing, from inside the fireplace. Slow, wet, waiting. I found a hidden door behind the hearth. Below it, a tunnel. Bones lined the walls. Children's bones. Stockings nailed above each pile. Names stitched into them. Lucy and my mother, and dozens more dating back to the 1940s. At the far end of the tunnel, something shifted. It stood upright. The Santa suit split open as it unfolded into something tall and thin and wrong. Its face burned black like coal. "You kept the tradition once," it said in a voice like cracking ice. "You invited warmth." It stepped closer. "You owe me Christmas." I burned the house down. The tunnels collapsed. The thing screamed like the forest itself was tearing apart. Hollow Creek lost power that night. They blamed faulty wiring. No one asked about the smoke coming from the woods. No one ever does. Now it's Christmas Eve again. I don't decorate. I don't celebrate. But sometimes when the snow falls heavy and the world goes quiet, I hear footsteps on the roof. And I know once someone else somewhere has invited it in. Story 8. I remember the exact moment my life split into before and after. It was December 23rd, snow falling in slow, lazy sheets over Red Hollow, Vermont. The kind of small American town where Christmas lights stay up until February and everyone pretends they know everyone else. I had just crossed the state line after an 11-hour drive from Ohio, my hands stiff on the steering wheel, my chest tight with memories I hadn't planned on revisiting. I told myself I was only coming back because my mother had asked, but the truth was simpler and harder. I was running from something. I grew up in Red Hollow, population barely 3,000, one main road, one grocery store, one church that rang its bells every evening at 6, no matter the weather. My father, Thomas Grayson, had been the town's unofficial handyman. My mother, Elaine, worked at the elementary school. We lived on Pine Creek Road in a narrow white house backed by woods so thick the sunlight struggled to reach the ground. Christmas used to mean safety to me, until the year my younger brother Evan disappeared. He was 9, I was 16. The police called it a runaway case for exactly 12 hours before they stopped pretending. They searched the woods, drained the creek, interviewed every neighbor. Christmas came and went with candles and prayers and casseroles, but Evan never came home. By February, the town moved on. My family never did. My father drank himself into silence. My mother folded inward, quieter every year. And I left the moment I turned 18, swearing I would never come back, not even for Christmas. Until this year. Elaine's voice on the phone had sounded wrong, thin, afraid. "Please," she said, "just for Christmas. I can't be alone in the house anymore." I didn't ask what she meant. I should have. The old house looked smaller than I remembered, hunched under snow like it was ashamed to still be standing. The woods behind it were darker now, taller, pressing closer. Pine Creek itself was frozen over, a thin white scar running behind the backyard. Inside, everything smelled the same. Pine cleaner, old wood, faint mildew. My mother had decorated early. A Christmas tree stood in the corner, lights glowing softly. Stockings hung on the mantel, 3 of them. Mine, my parents', and Evan's. That made my throat tighten. "I couldn't bring myself to put it away," my mother said softly when she saw me staring. "It feels wrong not to." I nodded, pretending I understood. That night after dinner, she went to bed early. I stayed up in the living room, listening to the wind push against the house. The old grandfather clock ticked steadily, each second echoing too loud. That was when I heard it. A bell, not the church bell. Smaller, closer. I froze. Another soft jingle followed, like a handbell being shaken once, carefully. I told myself it was the wind. Then I heard footsteps on the porch. I didn't wake my mother. I grabbed my jacket and stepped outside, my breath puffing white in the cold. The porch was empty. Snow lay undisturbed except for one thing, a single set of footprints, small, bare. They led from the woods to our front door. My heart hammered as I followed them backward, past the porch, across the yard, toward the tree line. The woods swallowed the tracks just 10 feet in, as if whatever made them had simply vanished. I stood there shivering, not just from cold. That night I dreamed of Evan standing in the woods ringing a bell, his mouth open in a scream I couldn't hear. The next morning my mother acted like nothing was wrong. She hummed while making coffee, smiling too much. "You slept okay?" she asked. I lied and said yes. But the bell returned the next night. This time it rang inside the house. One clear chime, then another. Slow, deliberate. I moved toward the sound, every instinct screaming at me to stop. It came from the hallway, from Evan's old room. The door was open. It hadn't been before. Inside, the room was exactly how it had been 15 years ago. The same twin bed, the same baseball posters, the same toy chest at the foot of the bed. And sitting neatly on the pillow was a small silver bell. The kind you hang on a Christmas stocking. My hands shook as I picked it up. It was ice cold. Behind me, the grandfather clock struck 6. And from the woods outside, the church bells began to ring. I confronted my mother the next morning. She didn't deny anything. Instead, she started to cry. "We didn't tell the police everything," she whispered. "Your father, he thought he was protecting us." That was when she told me about December 24th, 15 years ago. Evan hadn't run away. He had followed the sound of bells into the woods. A man had been living back there, deep among the trees. A drifter who came into town once a year around Christmas. He rang bells to attract children, told them stories, gave them candy. My father had found Evan that night, alive, and had killed the man, buried him near Pine Creek. He told me it was over, my mother sobbed, that Evan would come home. But Evan never did, because Evan hadn't been alone. On Christmas Eve, the bells rang nonstop, from the woods, from the house, from inside my head. The tree lights flickered. The clock stopped ticking. Snow fell heavier than I'd ever seen, smothering sound, trapping us in silence broken only by the bells. At midnight, the front door opened by itself. Footprints appeared again, leading inside. I followed them, knowing exactly where they would go. To Pine Creek. The ice was gone. The water flowed black and slow, and standing on the opposite bank was Evan, or what was left of him. His face was pale, stretched wrong. His eyes were too dark. A bell hung from his neck, stained with rust and something darker. "They never let me leave," he said, his voice layered with another beneath it. "Not him, not Dad, not you." The water behind him began to move. Hands reached up from beneath the surface. I understood then. The bells didn't call people to die. They called them to stay. I rang the bell from Evan's bed, once, twice. The sound cut through the night like glass. The hands retreated. The woods went silent. Evan smiled, just like he used to, and stepped backward into the creek, sinking without a splash. The bell in my hand cracked in half. The church bells rang one final time, then stopped forever. The police found bones near Pine Creek in the spring. They closed the case quietly. My mother moved away. The house was torn down, but every Christmas, no matter where I am, I hear them. Soft, patient, waiting. And I know one day when the snow is heavy and the night is quiet, I'll follow the sound back into the woods, because the bells never stop calling.